Welcome to the Try-Catch Technology Podcast, your source for all things tech. Today we're going to be talking about Anki. Anki is a really neat piece of software that allows you to build your own flashcards for studying just about anything. It's very powerful and quite complex. If you've never used it before, you should give it a try. I just started using Anki, and one thing I found was I had a hard time understanding how to initially set it up. It's pretty complicated, so the documentation is terrific. But I wanted to get a really high-level view of how to use it. So I thought it would be helpful to others if I created a diagram that showed just how generally Anki is set up, and it might be able to help you when you're first getting started. So let's take a look. So if you've never seen Anki, this is Anki. When you load up the software for the first time, you'll see this screen, and it has what we call decks. And you create new decks, and within the decks are your study cards. You can have nested decks. For example, I've set up a test deck here called College. If I click on this college link, I have another subdeck called Freshman, and then Calculus 101, Physics 101, and then Sophomore. So I'm just trying to give you an idea of how you could actually create subdecks within each other. If you can also create a new deck, and you can call it test, let's just say, a new deck, and it's going to create it at the top level, and then you can just drag and drop it into another deck, and it'll make it a subdeck. So it's very quick and easy to create new decks. Now you want to probably organize this in a decent way depending on how you're studying. In this test deck, what I've done is if you go to browse, you can see all of your information. And it's another way of viewing your cards and decks and flags and tags and so forth. We've created these decks, College, Freshman, Calculus 101. I created two questions, two very simple question 1, answer 1 question, and question 2, answer 2 questions with tags on them, level 1, level B. And we'll get into this a little bit more. So this one has level 1, level B. So it's a nested tag. And this card is level 1, level A. And then in physics, I did something similar, 2 quick little test cards with a question and answer on the front and the back. And level 1A tag and level 1, level B tag. And if you've never seen Anki and seen how it works, this is a very simple, if we can preview this, we could say physics question 2, and you say, show me that answer, and it shows you the answer, and then you tell it how you did. But we won't get too detailed into that. I just want to talk from a very high level at first. So that's how I set up this kind of college freshman calculus physics test deck, just to demonstrate how some of this works. So that's from a very high level. So now what I want to do is review. I've created this diagram, which kind of gives an overview of the relationship between decks and cards and notes and tags and other card attributes like flags and state. So hopefully this will help you. I had a little trouble interpreting it at first from the documentation. So I did this diagram to kind of solidify it in my mind of how it's set up and what the best way it is to set things up and study. So let me put these both on the same page so that we can look at these at the same time. Let me set this up quickly for a second. So let's look at the let's look at the full diagram first and just get let me just give you a quick overview of the diagram. And if you've never used this tool, this is Obsidian. This is what I use for note taking. It's an awesome tool if you've never seen it, and it's free. It's open source. So in this diagram, I've created some general sections. A study section for how the studying happens, decks. And as you can see, the decks can be nested. They can have parent decks and child decks, as I just showed, and a custom study deck, which is really important, which I'll show in a minute. Then you have what's called, within each of these decks, this is the general part. You have card instances. You have cards for everything you want to study. And all those cards are inside these decks. And you can study the decks independently, or if you study the parent deck, it'll study all the cards within that deck, the child decks and everything. So the cards live inside the decks. Then the cards themselves, the card instances, are created from what's called notes. And it was a little confusing to me at first, but a note is basically a template. It's a way for you to set up quickly creating notes and cards, I should say, card instances. And they come with a group of default out of the box type of questions, which we'll get into in a second. So you basically have, you study decks or custom decks. The decks have cards. The cards are made from note type templates, which allows you to quickly generate a lot of cards at one time based on just a couple of inputs. And then the card instances themselves, they can have tags. So these tags can become important if you want to do some custom studying. So the cards themselves have tags, and these tags can also be nested. You can have parent tags and child tags. And also cards can also have other attributes like flags. They have colored flags, so you can flag things red, yellow, green, and so forth. And card state. For example, it's a new card, it's been already studied, or there's a lot of other card states that go with that. And I'll show that in a second when I pull up Anki itself. So let's look at this first. So this is studying, and let me put this over on this side. I'll pull up Anki as well. So we're on this side, I have the diagram, my diagram, and on the right side, I have Anki. So as you can see, we have parent decks and child decks, just like we have here. College is a parent deck, freshman is child of college, and so forth and so on. So you can study the parent deck, which would study all the cards from all three decks in this diagram. So if you studied the college deck, it would pull in questions from all its children as well. And sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Or you can pick calculus, and it would just study cards within that deck. So if I, for example, if I click on calculus and it's going to say study now, it would study just the two cards within this deck. If I pick college, it's going to say 4 cards because there's 2 cards in physics and 2 cards in calculus. So that's how you can study that. And what you can also do is you can select a deck and click custom study. So over here in this yellow section I'm talking about right now, you can select a deck and click custom study to create a study plan based on tags and any other filtering, flags, tags, the state of the card, and so forth. And this will create a temporary deck with these cards, only those cards to study. What's great about that is you can focus on specific areas and things that you want to study. And Anki keeps track of how well you're saying you're doing on all these questions, whether you need to review them again or how poorly you've done on it. And it tracks it all. And when you create that custom deck, those will fold back into the original deck, so it keeps track of how well you're doing on everything. If you haven't seen that before either, you can go to stats. This keeps track of all of how you're doing in that card count. And you can see this one, how you haven't studied anything in it, so it's not showing us anything, but it keeps just statistics on how you're doing on all of your cards. So that's originally how you can study, and why it's important to understand the relationship of how you're setting up your cards within specific decks and how you tag them and flag them and so forth, because it affects your study plan and how well you can study things. So understanding those relationships is quite important. We can actually go in, if I go into calculus and I say study now, this is going to show me calculus question 1. And then when I click on show answer, it's going to show me the answer. And then at the bottom down here, you can see I say, this isn't clear, down here at the bottom, you say whether I need to learn it again, it was hard, it was good, it was easy. And when you do that, it's quite complex algorithm that Anki has that figures out how long to wait before I show you this card again. So if you said I need it again, it's going to show you with 1 minute, 6 minutes, 10 minutes, 4 days. So that's how it's out of the box set up. So it's kind of important that you're honest with yourself about how well you're doing on these questions, because this is repetitive learning. So you want to do it correctly when you answer the questions. So that is how the questions work from that standpoint. Oh, let me just pull the Anki back up here for a second. Okay. So that actually is going to show us how it's set up from the deck standpoint. And if I go to the stats for something a little bit more elaborate, let me actually look at something bigger. So this shows you, this is my personal deck, and it shows a lot of the stats. I haven't been using this very long, but it shows you all the stats about how we're doing on each of those questions. Okay. So now that's how you study and how the decks are set up. So now let's kind of take a look a little bit at card instances. So if you go into the college deck, and you don't have to go into there. If you click browse brings up this other window. So this is another window that Anki, this is how you really manage a lot of the metadata and the cards and decks and note types in Anki. So as you can see, they have a left nav menu that shows you today how many are due. If you click on these, it's going to show you the cards and so forth that are due, how many have been added, edited, and so forth. So that's kind of state. That's what we were talking about down here for the card state. Okay. And then we have flags. Cards can be hit with flags. So if you look at the flags, you can flag specific cards with different colors, so you can organize them in some way or study them in some way. And we also have card state, which is new, learning, review. So this is the card state. Suspended, buried, which I'm not going to get into the details on this. The video would be just too long. Then here are my decks: current deck, my deck, college. And here we talked about this already, which college has everything in it. Freshman has everything in it. Calculus just has 2 questions. Physics has 2 questions. And sophomore is empty right now. So those are my decks. And then we have note types. And these are very important. These are basically the templates that you create your cards from. The out of the box ones just say basic. These are just basic 4 basic types. These are custom. This basic D226EF, and these are my custom decks. So I made copies of these to not overwrite them and created my own versions of those. So basic is just basically, a question and answer type. It's very simple. Reversed would be basically it'll have create two cards. If you created a card of the basic type and reverse card, it would create the question and answer, and then the answer and question. So when you do enter one set of data, it would create two cards for you, which is great. And then there's an optional one for creating optional cards, and so on and so forth. And then there's cloze type, which is really awesome, which it would occlude a sentence. So if you had a sentence and you wanted to hide a couple of words and answer them, that's what a cloze type question is. And then image occlusion is great. And you can see in this example, let me zoom in a little bit on, we can preview this in a second, but image occlusions allows you to hide parts of an image, and each hidden piece is another separate question. So you can tally up how well you're doing on each of them. So you can very quickly create many, many questions to test yourself on very quickly with image occlusion. So if I previewed this, for example, let me zoom in a teeny bit on this. But this is basically a fretboard for a guitar, and I've hidden all the notes from the first fret to the 12th fret to try to memorize them. And you could see this pink one is right now, because we're in preview mode, is saying, okay, what is this note? And then when you click it, it'll unhide it and show you the note, and you say how you did, and then you go to the next one, and it would do all those questions for you. It's a really, really powerful image occlusion. So that's image occlusion. And then you have tags, which we talked a little bit about. And as you can see, I've set up some of these dummy tags for the dummy decks that I set up for level A and level B, so you can have them nested. So there's level 1, and inside those two child, level A, level B. And these cards are assigned these tags. And you can see down here at the bottom is where you can assign them. You can just add a new, you can add a new tag. It'll allow you to do that. So it's quick and easy to add new tags. So that's it in a nutshell for the browsing and looking at everything. So let's go back to our diagram, and we talked about studying and decks and child-parent relationship. And let's zoom out a little bit about this. Let me focus on this a little bit. So here we see the card instances. Let me just pull this all the way up. So we have the card instances. And those belong to the decks. And each one of these card instances, the cards that were made from note types. So the card instances are of type note type. And you can create your custom ones. I suggest using the out-of-the-box ones. The default note types that come out of the box are these basic ones. We talked, it's just question and answer, reverse card, cloze, and image occlusion, what we talked about. And those suit most people's needs. You typically need to do it. But you can create a separate note types, make copies of these, and then go wild and generate your own note type. You can have custom fields on them. You can completely customize the type, the fields. You can add cascading style sheets to add colors and all sorts of stuff. So the cards are of type note type, and that's how you generate the cards. And then the card instances themselves, card instances can have tags, as we said. So the card instances can have tags that were nested, and this is what you can do custom studying with, and also flags and card state. So you can use the tags and the card state and flags to generate custom plans. Let's take a look at that really quickly, because that's kind of important. So we go back to our Anki card deck. if, say, for example, we wanted to create a custom study plan based on our freshman stuff. So if we went into college, it's going to stay study now. But down at the bottom, down here, way at the bottom, there's this custom study button. So if you click on that custom study button, it allows you to filter the cards. So what you can do, what you want to do, for example, if you want to do by state or tag, study by card, by state or tag, pick 100 cards from that deck, new cards only, due cards, all review cards, so on and so forth. So you could say all cards in random order, and you say choose tags, and you could say, I only want to study level 1, level B cards, and you say okay. And what it does is it creates this custom study session deck, and you can go in here and you can study just those 2 cards. So if we go back to decks, what you can also do when you do a custom study, it automatically defaults to this custom study session deck name. If you want to keep it and rebuild it every time you do it and keep that same filter criteria for this custom study deck, you can just rename it. You can just rename this deck to my custom deck, whatever you want. And then you can keep this around, and you can go back in here and create a new custom study deck, and you can keep those. And what's great is when you study these cards, it keeps track of how well you're doing it on them. And then when you're done with this custom study one, you just delete it. But those cards aren't deleted. They're still in our decks, and the study, how well you did on them, is still tracked in the stats, which is great. So you can focus on specific cards within your decks. So I hope this was helpful to everyone. It helped me a little bit to understand how everything is set up with Anki. And, it's a free tool. It's awesome if you're learning, if your kid's in school or just trying to learn anything new on your own. It's really worth spending the time to study the information and create these study plans and cards and review them. And it reviews them over months. So every few months, it'll bring a card back up that you haven't reviewed in a while. And it's really a great tool. So hopefully this was helpful for everyone. And thanks for joining. If you have any questions or something else you want to see on this, please drop a note in the comments. Thanks.